I haven't graduated. Oh, right. She's a teacher.
What do you still do?
I can't hang too hard tonight. Whatever you do. But I would so do it today. But I will. To not do it. Yeah, there's something nice about it. It's very flirty. I mean, I think if I actually had a six like that, I would surely add it. But I don't have to like that. That's the thing. So we have like a listserv they send out, like, this is the, I just saw this. I know, but I feel like I think I got a little thrilled and then did I also did I do something bad?
No, it's annoying that
I mean, at the same time, that's not what I did. He didn't. I don't think it was any email that suggested it. I think it's on society.
yeah.
Hello, welcome everybody. Hi everyone. We weren't expecting this many people to show up. Thank you for coming out this time of year. We know it's the end and people are ready to go. Okay. All right, perfect. So welcome, I'm Sasha Bonet.
I'm Mary Wang. Hello, everyone.
Hi guys. So we graduated around this time last year from this MFA program, which we adored. And we want to thank Philip Lopate for helping us to put this together, our beloved Philip Lopate. Thank you. So we graduated around this time last year, and we've been working, freelancing, and we're noticing that a lot of the beautiful things that we learned here in the program weren't really taught to us about how to be working writers who make money and like make a living. So we decided to put together this panel with some of the industry's best or the finest that we believe who can help you to give you some great advice and sharing their expertise. So we're going to begin now. Okay.
So we have 4 wonderful panelists sitting here. The first one is Umair Kazi. He's a legal consultant at Authors Guild. He can tell you more about his work, but he's also a recent MFA graduate from our fiction program.
Woo!
I used to move these tables until last year.
And then we have Gail Hochman, who is a literary agent, amongst others, working with our beloved Philip Lopate. Also, she will introduce you to her work. Then we have Morgan Jerkins, who is a very experienced freelance writer and also an MFA graduate. She will also tell you more about what she's up to these days. And then, of course, we have Leah Chernikoff, who is editorial director at Elle, amongst many other things. So very excited to get this started. We want this to be an open conversation. We have thought of some of the questions you might want to ask, but if you want to interrupt us at any time, please just raise your hand and we'll make sure that we get to you. We will also reserve the end of the program for you to ask questions in case you want to. So without much further ado, I'll leave it up to our panelists to introduce themselves. Umair, do you want to start?
Sure. Hi. So first of all, thank you, Sasha and Mary. This is one of the best things that came out of a party conversation. We had a very spirited conversation about how hard it is to sort of manage a professional life after the MFA. And Mary took the initiative with Sasha and put this together. So thank you. I work in the legal department of the Authors Guild. We're the nation's oldest and largest professional organization for writers. We've been around for since 1912, so 105 years. So what I do there, I do a number of things, but most of my days are spent reviewing book contracts, which are exceptionally boring at times. but you know, I mean, also tremendously important. So, as most boring things are. And we also do a lot of copyright advocacy on Capitol Hill, trying to make copyright law more friendly for authors, give them more of a more control. And one of the things that we're doing now is sort of pushing for moral rights, which is a concept that's around in Europe, but not so much in the U.S.
Can I possibly speak without the mic? Can you guys hear me?
This is for the recording. Yes.
Okay. Gives such gravitas when you're talking to the mic. Anyway, I started my career in publishing. None of you were born, except for Philip. None of you were then born, and the dinosaurs roamed the earth. And I worked, my first job was as an editorial assistant in a company that is now part of Penguin Putnam. At the time it was privately owned. I got a job as an agent, and then after 5-6 years I went to a different agency. I now own a 110-year-old book agency. I have 14 employees. I pay 14 bonuses. First thing I have to say is if you want to be a writer and make a living at being a writer, rule 1, anyone in my job would say, what do you think that is?
Rule 1?
Yeah.
Check your royalties, dude.
No. No. Keep your day job.
Oh.
Keep your day job.
I was getting too technical.
You're getting very technical. The point is, it's really tough to be a full-time writer as the only thing that you do. So if you're teaching, or if you're like these are the kind of jobs writers often have. If you're teaching something, if you're an editor somewhere, if you're a story editor for a film or a TV kind of group where you read manuscripts for them, there's a lot of different jobs. A bookstore employee, you learn about what's really selling. There are many things you can do to make your knowledge as a writer deeper and stronger. In the long run, it will help you. But if you sit home and say, I've graduated college, I've taken an apartment, I bought my first refrigerator full of groceries, and you call me, I am on the other end of the phone completely speechless, like, oh my God, because it is hard, it's very uphill. So I think one can make a living as a writer, and we'll give you all kinds of ideas about how to do it. But one thing is, if you put all of your emotional energy into, I have to make it, this book has to sell, you're setting yourself up for an unbalance that's going to be hard in your life. So that's why most of us would say, try to find a job that pays your basic bills so you don't have that stress. If you're writing little articles as a stringer for a newspaper, that's fine too, but it is a job. Try to get some kind of health insurance so that you have the basics covered. And I was just telling Umar over here, who's writing a novel, as I hope everybody here is, I have found that if you have nothing to do but write a novel, all you have is your computer and a whole box of clean white paper. That is not as easy as it sounds. But if you steal an hour away in the mornings before you go to work and 3 hours each Saturday and Sunday, you discipline yourself. Somehow those books are very inspired. It's okay if you're very busy and you steal time for your own book. For some reason, I feel those books have there's something more important about them. Isn't that a weird thing to say? But anyway, I have a lot of technical things to say, but we'll hold that for later.
Hi everyone, can everyone hear me? Yes. My name is Morgan. I've been a freelance writer for 3 years. It was not my intention to be a freelance writer. I graduated from Princeton in 2014, and I assumed that I was just gonna get my own nice apartment in Secaucus and then go into the city and work as like an editorial assistant somewhere. That did not happen. I was humbled very quickly. So I went back to my really small podunk town in South Jersey, and I was on the internet like 8-10 hours a day. I think I may have had I was in a sort of depressive mood, but I saw that there were a lot of ideas being exchanged on the internet, and I thought, wow, I want to participate in that. And then I thought, oh, I can actually get published, and oh, I can actually make money too. So that was really great, because there was nothing going on besides me getting like my MFA at Bennington during that time. So In the 3 years that I've freelanced, I've written for like the New Yorker, the New York Times, Rolling Stone, BuzzFeed, among other places, and it has been a hustle. My routine usually is like me getting up in the morning and like working out in order to get those endorphins going, because every day can be very, very different. And then it's like me opening up multiple Google tabs and having my Excel spreadsheet and figuring out my budget and things like that. I've sold a book. My debut essay collection is coming out early next year. It's going to be published by Harper Perennial, which I'm really excited about. But as Gail said, like, it is the thing of like making sure that you sort of divide your time between different jobs. I will say that I'm very fortunate and blessed to be able to write and have time for myself. But when I first moved to New York, I was a summer school teacher in Prospect Park. It was a 2-hour commute. And I was teaching like first generation Chinese American kids, and it helped because it helped me to get out of my head. I love tutoring a lot. I also am a contributing editor at Catapult, which is like a literary startup based in Midtown Manhattan. So that's also great because I like writing, but it is a very isolating activity. And it helps me to like talk to a lot of emerging writers like yourselves and sort of try to buy their work, whether it's narrative nonfiction or fiction. And so, yeah.
Can you guys hear me? I'm Leah. So I'm the editorial director of Elle.com. Morgan also writes for us. I'm very thrilled to have her work on our site. A little bit about me. I've been at Elle for over 3 years now. Before that, I was at a small fashion site called Fashionista that I eventually led and grew for about 3 years. And before that, I was a reporter at the New York Daily News. And I don't have an MFA. I got a liberal arts degree, which I, had no idea what to do with, and I worked in nonprofit education. I thought I'd go to law school. So I took a very circuitous route here because ultimately I decided I hated the LSATs and I really wanted to figure out how to be involved in storytelling. And I just hustled a lot. I got a lot of other jobs so that I could pitch and pitch and pitch until some editors started to trust me, and then that's how I ultimately ended up at the Daily News, which was a very good training ground for me. But now I manage a team of 15. I'm involved in a lot of those sort of workings of the magazine and publishing business in terms of the sales side, social media, sponsored content, lots of like kind of terrifying words that I can maybe make less scary for you. Some of these places are a nice way to make money while you're, writing the things that you want to write on the side. And I'm happy to share with you guys as we keep going.
Okay, so it seems appropriate that our first question would be, how do you start? Many of you who are sitting among us are graduating in 2 weeks. Either you're thinking about starting to work in the summer or finding something to do. And I'm just wondering whether each of you have some advice in terms of what do you need to know before you approach an editor, an agent, a publishing house, and how do you get ready to do that?
Okay, so here's my question. Raise your hand if you're a fiction writer. Okay. Well, and of you people who are fiction writers, how many of you are getting ready to have a finished manuscript of a novel? And how many of those people feel that novel is almost really polished, like you can't look at it again? If you look at it again, you'll make it worse. It's done. Okay, so there's 2 of you. Now how many of you therefore are nonfiction writers?
Yeah.
And of you guys, how many of you have an idea for, let's say, a book? And how many of you have started to write a proposal? And so some of you know what you have to do. Okay, none of you need agents except for the 2 or 3 people who are doing the nonfiction proposals and the 2 people who have a finished, polished agent, a manuscript for a novel. You don't need to find an agent until you have something that the agent can sell for you. So let's say I'm here today. You think I'm so nice. You come up to me. You want me to be your agent today. You don't need me as your agent today. You need me as your agent when you have a piece of material that's ready to go out to potential publishers. So you don't need to worry about agents. You don't need to worry about, definitely don't have to worry about publishers until you're further down the road. So I'm just answering that part of your question.
I guess we can probably speak together a little bit about So I'm the editorial director, which we were just talking about. I don't closely edit as much as I once did in sort of previous iterations of my work, because I do a lot of management, but I field pitches, assign, occasionally edit, and sort of ideate and rely on my team to find talented voices. So in terms of being ready with a pitch, you know, I think, like, of course it helps to sort of like have a way in, whether you've connected with that editor before, or have some kind of connection through a person, like even if like we were to meet tonight, like that would be, you know, the start. But then it's also about, for me, it's like and every editor is different, frankly. So for me, it's like the pitch is concise. It really tells me a story that I think is worth telling, that's timely. Like, it has to just ultimately answer a why to me and why it would speak to our readership. And that pitch shows me that this person is familiar with, you know, the place that I'm working for, has been reading what we publish, that it seems to sort of match up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that one of the biggest mistakes that writers make is that they don't know who they're pitching and they don't know where they're pitching. So like, if you go online and you have an editor that says, oh yeah, I'm an associate editor at BuzzFeed, and that person has their email address, and like, oh, I want to write for BuzzFeed, so I'm going to pitch that person. Was that person the associate editor of the BuzzFeed LGBT, the BuzzFeed Reader, BuzzFeed News? So you have to figure out which section is that person a part of, because even if you send the most robust pitch, you don't know if that person's going to be kind enough to forward it to the correct editor. Some of the other things that I tell writers especially is like, what are you trying to assert and how are you going to assert it? So usually if you can do it in like 500 to 650 words, that's usually the cutoff I give myself, because I'm extremely long-winded. So a lot of times I'll speak with writers, but even those who have a couple bylines under their names, and they'll have these really great ideas, but they don't have a peg. Like, they don't peg it to anything that's happening currently. So someone might say, you might have like a person who has like an art history background, and they're like, well, I want to write about the color schemes with women in like oppressive regimes. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. But if someone were like, I want to study that and then compare it to The Handmaid's Tale, it's like, okay, there you go. That's relevant, because a lot of times when editors commission work, they're going to figure out like, am our readers going to read this? Are people going to click on it? Is it relevant? Those are the sort of things that I would say. And especially for, I think another thing is that a lot of times for women writers, it's really like disheartening when I see pitches, like incredible pitches from women who are like, you know, I don't know what I'm doing, or if I may do this, like really cutesy language. And then when you go to their bio, it's like, this person has a PhD in this, or this person's like, and it's like, oh, then why are you acting like you're not kind of like an expert in this? Like, when you approach an editor, like, don't assume that the editor sits in like, it's like an evil person sitting in a big midtown Manhattan office, and it's like maliciously getting joy from rejecting your pitches. They do not know who you are. You know what I mean? They have so many things, as Leah said, they're doing so many things throughout the day. It's just like, make it known what you want to talk about. Make sure it has a relevant news peg. And if you know your stuff, like, own it.
Wow.
I've actually seen editors smoking really big cigars and
What's that?
I did work at the Daily News. They existed.
do they smoke big cigars
they
and
exist,
big
but
suspenders?
yeah.
I guess like I just wanted to chime in and speak to Gail's point earlier, because I think this is something that I became aware of as soon as I got out of the program, is that when you're in the MFA program and you come in, it's weirdly the threshold of someone's success is if they have an agent, or if they have like so-and-so agent, which Gail very rightly said, you need to have a manuscript first before you can go to any agent. So it's just important to, you know, kind of modulate your expectations for what your threshold for success is.
Okay, Okay, so let me just, what's your question? But because I had something I'm going to go to, but what's your question?
Oh, thanks. Based on what Morgan said, I mean, everybody here knows a professor who knows somebody at a different publication. So, like, how useful is it to ask around for, like, introductions to editors first for a pitch? Is that an okay thing to do? Is it effective?
I do
Okay,
it.
can I just chime in because we don't have mics for the audience, so if you don't mind, I'm just going to repeat your question so we have that on the recording. Your question is, as I understand it, how important is it to ask someone else that you know that might be a professor or someone you know to chime in or to connect you, right?
I would do it. I mean, I've been through many instances where I was like, hey, well, mostly through the internet, because I mean, I wasn't in Columbia. I was not in like the hotbed of like all these different connections. So there'd be many times where I would send a DM or send some G-chat like, hey, like, do you have a contact with that person? And the worst that someone could say is no, or they could just leave the read receipt and not read it. It's like, okay, well, I'm still gonna find it some other way. I mean, it's the internet. But what I would say is that if you do, like, my motto for like everything that did, like in terms of my career is like, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. So if you have someone who is going to make that connection for you and do the introduction on email, make sure you already have that pitch ready. Because
and it's really good.
Yeah, because a lot of times many times people take that introduction seriously, because if I say to Leah, I'm introducing you to this writer, I want her to know that, like, I'm actually basically supporting this person. So if this person says, well, I want to write about this, and it's like misspelled words, like, Leia's gonna be like, Morgan, like, who is this person? So like, just make sure that you have your pitch ready, because it can, if the person says, okay, I'll do it, and they send an email that day and the person gets back, depending on how close they are, make sure you have that pitch ready.
I would also just add, like, the worst thing that can happen, like Morgan said, is you get a no or you don't hear back. So like, there's like, always try. Like, try anyway. And to her point about the internet, like, I have found a lot of writers, also myself, proactively, just like on Twitter, I'm the one doing like sort of DMing people. So just know that, like, what you put out there publicly on social media can also be a great way to sort of establish yourself as a voice. And it can be a good way to connect to editors too, who have a big and robust social presence. If you say, like, I think I know what this person's about and what they like based on, you know, what they tweet, like, I think I've got a pitch that's gonna line up.
And I think also, don't assume that, like, once you reach a certain threshold, you're not going to get rejected anymore. Like, that does not happen. Someone assumed that, like, oh, like, you got published in this place, I just assume you don't get rejected anymore. And I was like, I got rejected last night. Like, I mean, it's like for every 3 pieces I get published, probably about 3 other pieces I get rejected.
That's a good ratio.
I mean, maybe more. I haven't counted, but it's like, okay. I mean, and in some days it's like, especially being a freelance writer, there's so many hills and valleys. Like, in one week, I remember I was working on a feature, and it just was not coming together. And even though, like, the person said yes in the beginning to the pitch, it got killed, and I was upset because I was like, I worked so hard on it. But in that same week, it got published, like, in one of my dream publications. It happens.
What was your dream publication?
New Yorker. So it was in the same week. So I was like, I'm happy, but I was like, I still got a piece killed, but it just goes off and on like that. So yeah, just you can say, you cannot get a response, you can say no, but just keep moving.
So this question about should you use your connections, of course use your connections. And as they were saying, you must deliver really good material when you use those connections. One rule, there is no such thing as favors. So somebody connects you, the professor, to their best friend or their wife or their sister-in-law's nephew's girlfriend or something, just because they know that person so well does not mean your story will be picked up. You got to deliver amazing stuff. The other thing is, I have to just emphasize this because, you know, you send off your material to the other guy, and you're waiting, and you're looking at the phone, and there's no email from the guy, and you're waiting. If you saw my house, you would howl with laughter. And sometimes I wish I traveled around. I have a kitchen table, manuscripts like this. I have a kitchen counter, manuscripts I'm not that interested in, up to here. The 9th draft of a novel. I sent out a novel, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, 600 pages. I read 4 or 5 drafts, I sent it out. We didn't get it sold. I thought, okay, well, what can you do? Next, go to the next thing. Last month, I got a new draft. holy, I gotta read the new draft, 600 pages, it's like this. Is that my priority? No. The bottom line is recognize you're only dealing with humans, and we're all up to here with our workload. So we would all say, number one, send your best stuff. That's what it's good. You can't go to an MFA program and learn how to write, but you can learn how to be a better critical reader, maybe a better editor of your stuff, maybe listen to your friends' comments. Send out your best. And that it has to match the audience is what they're saying. What are they going to do with a men's adventure story at Elle.com? It's like not going to happen. So you got to. So there's no favors, and we all have a workload. So you have to realize. So your favor, the fact that the guy will read your thing because your professor thinks you're so smart, is recommending you. Yeah, they'll read your thing. But what I find in book length, let's talk about book length things. And your book is 300 pages, and the real exciting stuff happens on page 100. So what's wrong with this picture? So, raise your hand, tell me. What's wrong with this picture?
It takes too long to get to it.
They're reading page 1 and chapter 2 and chapter 3, and nothing's happening, and there's nothing urgent, and they don't really care, and your big and exciting thing is on page 100. They're rejecting it to the agent before they get to page 90.
And I want to ask some more specific questions to Morgan and Umair. In terms of, if we're talking about the real specifics, Morgan, for example, do you, before you work on something, do you have like a number in mind that you think that it should be worth? Do you have maybe a set of strategies in mind of how, like that's my bottom line? And Umair, for you, maybe you can weigh in on the legal aspect, like before a writer starts a working relationship with someone, what do they need to have sorted out? What do they need to know?
No, I don't write and think, well, you know what, this piece is really good, it's gonna be worth $500. No, I don't. I don't know, I don't want it to make it seem like what I'm about to say is gonna be like, it's like really privileged and like out of touch, but it's like, I'm just focused on the idea and getting that right. Because if I'm not even crafting the pitch and I'm already thinking, how much money am I gonna get for that? It's going to reflect in the writing itself. My writing is going to become very, very, I don't even know. It's not going to become alive, I don't think. I think the issue with a lot of freelance writers or people who want to freelance or write online, whatever, is that they have to understand that rates vary widely. It's not like one set rate across the board. So, for example, if you're writing a personal essay for an indie publication, I'm talking about one that does not have ads, one that just starts from the ground up, you cannot expect to get $600 for that personal essay. And usually, I found a lot of times, reported features command more than personal essays. Reported features mean like you interview people, you transcribe notes, you do fact checking, things like that. And so, yeah, like I don't think about how much money something's gonna cost, but I do know in the back of my mind that if I'm doing a personal essay, I may not get as much as, say, me going out and interviewing people. And I also take into account if this is a company like New York Magazine's The Cut, like versus someplace else, like what are other things that matter to me besides, like in addition to the money? Like New York Magazine's The Cut has 1 million followers on Twitter. That stuff matters to me. I'm a millennial. You know what I'm saying? So if it's like, if I'm interested more than that, so if they pay me $100 less than a company that may not have as big of a reach, I might still choose The Cut. It just depends on like what I'm looking for. It depends on the editors that I know there, because you also have to understand, even if you want your piece to be placed in, I don't know, like The Guardian or whatever, also make sure that like that's your journalistic footprint. Like, make sure you know that you trust the editor to like enough that you are okay with working with this person, and you think that editor can help you convey what you're trying to convey. And if you don't let them publish it.
Yeah, I mean, I think Morgan, what you're seeing, and I think this has been the theme of everything we've talked about so far, is sort of having agency over your work, but also being realistic about what you can get for it. And one of the unfortunate things, I guess, in the writing world is that unlike acting or even screenplay writing, which have unions and sort of set contract prices, we don't have that. So we're often I mean, if you end up becoming successful, you get to command your your book advance to some degree. To some degree, I mean, who knows how that magical process works. But so there's no I guess there's no bell in the bell curve, which is to say there's no bell curve. I think. I remember I asked. I was in this room my first semester here, and I was in a seminar with Donald Antrim, and we were talking about the publishing industry, and I asked him that question. Well, is there a middle? And he was like, no, it's like more like.
Okay, I'm not going to talk about monetizing. The first thing I'm going to say is how, before you start sending your material out to get paid for it, how can you make yourself a great candidate? Obviously, send your best stuff and your best idea with a peg to something current or something perfect for that audience. But I go to conferences often. I will promise you, everybody in this room can publish something and get a byline in the next 6 weeks. If you are like not looking at the New Yorker, like your alumni magazine. Think about it. The garden club that your mother runs or works for, your religious organization has a newsletter, your college magazine. Well, that's why I say alumni. There's somewhere you can publish. Build up your credits. When you pitch something, they're going to say, well, can this person write? Are you going to ask for a writing sample?
Yeah, I asked for clips.
So you ask for clips? Where are you going to get the clips? You got to start getting those clips. So if you're waiting to get paid enough money for your budget for those clips, you don't have clips. So the point is just get yourself out there and try to publish your stuff. There are big places where anybody can send, like Modern Love. Great column. Everybody in book publishing, does magazine publishing follow it too? We all read them and we think they're great, they're charming, they're alive, they're different. And anybody of you guys can send a story in there. And there are certain other, like the back page of numerous magazines, they're not waiting for agents to send, their famous writers thing. Mm-hmm. So build up your body of clips is one of the ways while you're working towards your serious adult career.
I think to piggyback off of that, like, I cannot tell you enough how much writing online has led to me getting an agent and getting a book deal. Like, a lot of the agents that you see, they are on the internet. They are looking, and a lot of places where they get their clients is because that client published an essay somewhere, or they've seen them multiple times in certain places. The people that I published at Catapult, like, they'll come back to me a couple months later and they'll say, oh, I'm working with this agent now. And even when, let's say if you do have a book under contract, like, those connections that you established with writing for said pieces, they're going to help when you need to promote your book. When I went into a meeting with like my editor last August, like, she told me, like, they paid attention to where I was writing and who was following me on Twitter, because that's going to help when they need to start drumming up publicity. So just also keep that in mind, that journalistic footprint that you have, like, that's going to help you find your audience, but it also might help lay the foundation for, all the other bigger works that you're going to do in the future.
Okay, thank you for that. Umair actually said something about agency and writers taking agency for themselves and for their work.
But also not to the exclusion of agents.
Of course. But I think it's actually a good question. Like, how do young writers actually take agency in themselves and, like, understand their worth and what they're doing and stand up for themselves and request those kill fees and negotiate the fees in which they're working for, and how much of that should be done as an early writer, still in school, just graduating, negotiating the rates that they are willing to take. And maybe, Umair, you can speak to this and people that you've worked with, and also Gail. Some people also get stuck in situations where agents trap them in contracts and don't want to let them out and hold on to their work. And how can writers stand up for themselves in this way?
Yeah, well, I guess, like, in terms of being an emerging writer, I feel like you have very little choices, and I think Morgan can speak more to that. It's just you kind of have to take what you're being offered, which makes the whole industry sort of able to prey on young talent in a way. But what I've seen, having worked at the Guild for a while, is that it's not something that really stops even if you've published a book or one or two books. And I think maybe this is something that's kind of an unfortunate writerly trait, is that you never see your work for what it's worth. So you never leave that critical eye behind to be able to negotiate its financial value with people, and sometimes especially if you've built if you've published a book, if you've published two books, or if you've built a pretty sort of strong portfolio, you should be a tough bargainer, I think. Within reason, obviously, but.
Like that one. So, raise your hand and tell me if I'm a magazine editor, you sent me an essay, I say I'll publish it, and you're supposed to be a tough bargainer. What are you going to demand? Raise your hand and tell me what you're going to demand. Somebody raise their hand. You want money, right? Somebody raise their hand and say money.
I want money.
Oh, you want money. Okay. What else is part of your negotiation? Because we're talking about negotiation as if the only thing is money.
A byline, because some publications don't give you a byline.
Okay, so you want a byline. Actually, I had a client, this was hilarious, and I love this girl, and I had no idea. She sent in an essay, and it was about, I'm going to say it, she was about a sex addiction. And she wanted us to help her with something. She had signed a contract, and she didn't want to use her name, blah, blah, blah. She signs a contract. They sent her a contract. She signed it. When we say negotiate, that's like the stage between getting it and signing it. So, and it said, we can use your name, your likeness, blah, blah. And she didn't say, oh my God, I signed that. She just said to my office, well, isn't this jolly, isn't this great? Thank you, you can commission it. Maybe you can help me on this other thing. I'm not sure I want to give my photo. And my person in the office didn't realize what the story was and the subject was. And she said, oh, okay, well, tell me about this story. It turns out she just signed the thing they gave her. And she wanted it to be totally anonymous. What a genius. I mean, come on.
That's the worst thing you can do.
Like, the worst thing you can do. Okay, so you want to get money, you want to have your byline. What else do you want?
Rights, depending on.
Okay, so the question is, what rights do you give the publication? I wrote down 3 rules, but there's more. Number 1, never give them copyright. Right? No. That's like no.
Yeah.
Right. Number 2, you've seen this term writer for hire. Do you guys know what that means? Work for hire. Well, sometimes it's work for hire. It means you don't exist. You could have written it, he could have written it, she could have written it, he could have written it. The magazine owns it. They gave you the idea, let's say. They commissioned somebody to write it. It could have been you, it could have been, it doesn't even matter whether you get a byline or not. You own no rights. So, now you guys are sitting there, this is something, we beg you, all of us, don't just sign the contract they send. Make sure you understand it. You must keep copyright. Now this is so complicated, we're not going to go into it, but anybody here sits down and we say, okay, let's take 5 minutes, everybody write a little essay. You own that essay. You own everything about what you write.
Yeah.
There's like, 25 things, whatever, vested in copyright.
Well,
How
I
many
mean,
things?
there's a little bit of confusion about copyright for a lot of people. It doesn't mean that you have to register copyright to have copyright. It's kind of as soon as you finish writing something, you have the copyright in it, and it is one of the most important things. They're different. A copyright is kind of like a bundle of rights. So when you sign a book deal, you're giving the publisher often an exclusive right to print, sell, and market the book. And then there are these things called subsidiary rights, which involve dramatic rights, stage, television, translation, foreign publication rights. Serial rights are a separate category within the sort of nucleus of copyright. And so you don't, and this is why having your contract vetted by an agent or the guild or your attorney is very important, because if you just sign the contract, oftentimes the publishers will just take this boilerplate grant from you.
100% of the time.
But how much
100%
room do you have to
They love-
negotiate?
How much do you, well, I mean, especially if you think that your work, if you have what we say is if you have an agent, the agent is usually in the best position to sort of tell you what your property is worth. Movie rights generally are, and dramatic rights are usually the most important ones. Those are the rights that publishers covet the most.
That was rule 3.
Okay.
Never, ever, ever give your publisher your film rights. Ever.
Yes, no.
Okay.
No.
Just so we all agree on that.
Never.
Never.
Yeah, because you're just gonna lose out on way too much money, and the publisher will be smoking a big Cuban cigar.
Oh my God. Sorry, I gotta just continue. Agent's job is we read 500 billion, 1,000 billion pages a week or a month. We say to some people, I really would love to be your agent, and sometimes they don't want to go to me, they want to go to the next guy. We have to write rejection letters to really good people and really good writers. But let's say I take on your book. I go to publishers, I try to sell it. And we're talking full length, not an article, we're talking full length book project. Let's say I get you a deal. My job is, let's say I have 2 or 3 people who want to buy your book. My job is to manipulate these things, bring to you your possibilities, help you understand why this might be better. But many times, there's nothing. We go to round 1, nobody has any interest, like 0. We go to round 2, 0. We go to round 3. At a certain point when the writer says, well, we've gone to 35 publishers, but I think there's about hundreds more. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this is a time I want to take like a long trip to like Australia or something like that. It's like there's so much, there's a certain point where you can't really do much for that guy. But we send the book out, we get an offer. It's an offer for this much money as an advance. You want us to talk about money, I'm just going to go through it, it's very easy. An advance against your future earnings through that contract. So I'm the agent. You have a novel. I might want to sell them North American rights, US, Canada, Philippines, American territories. Anything not that territory is not covered by that contract. You wrote the book, you own copyright, we're only giving these guys these rights. Then later I go to a French publisher and they get French rights. I go to a Spanish publisher, they get Spanish rights. So the agent is doing 1 million deals for you if we are lucky to get them. Film, book, in the book world, the print world, remember you own everything, the scope of everything related to your characters, your story, the characterizations, that's like a whole definition. So I give to the US publisher a little slice of those rights. I give to the French publisher a little slice of those rights. Each of these book publishers only gets what their contract says they get. But a film contract is the reverse, it's like a negative. The film contract always says, we are buying, and these are words which I should make t-shirts, we are buying all right, title, and interest to your property. What does that mean? Your copyright, you've just basically handed over to them. So in the film contract, they're buying everything, except those reserved rights. The book contract, you're only giving them a few rights, and everything else is reserved to you. So do you see what I'm saying, or you don't see it? Because it's really an important thing. If you give your book publisher, you give Doubleday your film rights, they own the characters, the characterizations, they can make Rocky 1. Oh, isn't that funny? A little independent film made so much money. They make Rocky 2. They make Rocky 3. We're like now up to Rocky 10. If you gave your publisher the film rights, guess who's earning most of the money and having the decisions how to use your characters? Not you. Let's say it's a memoir. You really want your publisher to have the right to sell your life story? I don't think so. So do you see that? So agents are very useful at the time of a book sale. For magazines, you still have a contract. So you guys should talk about that because...
Yeah, I have writers who negotiate to preserve the rights. Like we've had a few pieces that have been optioned for films, and Mickey Rapkin is one of the writers, and he's the guy who wrote the story that then became the Pitch Perfect franchise. So he knows what he's doing when he writes a story. And one of the last ones he wrote for us got optioned really fast, and that contract was in negotiations for a long time. I had nothing to do with it, but he, knows what he's doing to protect his work.
And you never can negotiate a film deal. You absolutely need a lawyer or an agent.
Yeah, but if you are this was a piece that he wrote for us that I knew he was kind of wanting to put it out there, so it would be a movie. So, you know, like if you see the movie of your piece, like, you know, go into the contract sort of knowing that you want to protect that.
I actually, sorry.
Oh,
I was gonna ask you two guys a question. That's all. That's cool. But
yeah, I was just gonna say that, like, I hate admitting to this, but I think it's necessary. But I'm actually really bad at negotiating. It has a lot to do with me being a Black woman. I just never did it for the longest time. I was just like, you know what? Somebody's offering me money for this. Like, I should be grateful. And I'm trying to build up my portfolio. And the industry is very small, and I don't want to be classified as difficult. I've only started negotiating now if I've written pieces for that editor before and they've done well. I didn't do it in the beginning. I think it's hard to strike a balance, because I think especially for writers from underrepresented backgrounds, like, know your worth, you know what I mean? Like, if you're doing a hardcore reported piece and someone's like, I want to pay you $200 for it, it's like, no, like, I got to do a lot of work. But I remember one time I had a woman who had an extremely good pitch, and I wanted her to publish this essay for us, but then she was like, oh yeah, I want $600 for it. And I'm like, we're an indie publication. You don't have that many bylines. You've never written for us before. So, like, how do you, like, where did that number come from? So it's like, so that's why I say to pay attention to, like, where exactly you're pitching. Like, are you pitching indie publications? Are you pitching those who, you know, or corporate ones? Do you have bylines to your name? Because if you just come out the gate with, like, 0 bylines and you're expecting to get 2 or 3 times more than what editors generally pay their writers, it's like, you know. That's why I say it's really good to find your community, especially those with whom you share the same identity, to figure out what they're getting paid for their piece. But also keep in mind, if those people have already acquired a really strong portfolio, don't expect that you're going to get the same kind of deal as them.
But isn't there a sort of beauty in that type of audacity? Like, aren't you going to get more if you hit higher when you start, you know? Or, I mean, as an editor, you can tell us. Are you more likely to give that person more money, or are you just going to say, actually, no, we're not going to work with you?
Well, the thing is like, people also have to understand that editors are not just like making it rain. Like, they're not just like doing like that. Like, editors have budget allocations. It's not, and that's what I try to tell people who ask me about these things. It's like, they're not saying to you, we can only offer you $300 because they don't trust your writing. That might sometimes be the case. They don't know you yet, but also it's because they only have a certain budget to work with. So what I'm saying is like, I applaud anyone who has the audacity, but to do that, I think you definitely should be bold. But at the same time, if an editor cannot meet that, do not assume it's because the editor is trying to take advantage of you. That's what I'm saying.
Be bold but reasonable.
Yeah.
There's I'm sure you guys have heard of this website called whopayswriters.com.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good resource for sort of figuring out what people are getting paid, and so you can kind of, you know, manage your own pitch.
But remember, if you're writing for a Vanity Fair publication or you know, a Hearst publication, they pay by the word. So I honestly don't know right now what they pay, but when I had started out, they were paying
Magazines.
Magazines. So they pay. It used to pay like $1 a word. So we would say, well, this client has to get $3 a word, or $2 a word, or $5 a word, or whatever it is. So it's a little different than independent. You know, it's smaller magazine.
Usually you get paid more for print than online. Now, granted, there are places that pay very well, but sometimes for print, you'll be like, whoa, wow. The difference is that print, in terms of being paid and knowing if your byline is going to show up big, it's a little bit trickier. That's why I say it's a tougher landscape to sort of get through than online. But yeah, usually print pays more than online.
I'm going to say one more thing. Be bold, that's great, but really be educated, don't you think? The Authors Guild has unbelievable resources for writers to teach about how contracts should be and why. Writers Digest, press, and there's magazines. Poets and Writers has amazing articles. I'm not sure how technical they get, but when you go to any publication, online or print or a book publisher, whatever, they're going to send you a contract that says by signing this contract, you're giving us blah, blah, blah rights. You really have to learn that so you can protect yourself. And if you don't ask, why would they change it? They're not changing it, right?
Right. I mean, and that's the thing. It's interesting. Well, I wanted to go back to this distinction between print and online. I mean, is it just because print has been around longer, that's why it's more of a traditional?
Maybe. That's why they pay more?
That's why they pay more.
Well, I mean, print still makes more in terms of advertising. I mean, gradually that's shifting.
Mm-hmm.
It's been shifting for a long time, but you take out a print ad in a magazine, like that costs way more than taking out a marquee or something that flanks the sides of a piece on a website. So that's just sort of the math of it. But then I would also say that, like, you write a print piece, like that goes through, I don't know, could be 3 to 7 rounds of edits. You pitch, like, in 1 month, it doesn't show up until 7 months later if you're writing for a monthly. So it's also a kind of like time trade-off too that you're making. And if you're someone who can write and can write fast, and the turnaround time for publishing online is often way, way faster.
Do you guys also have a standard contract for online content, or okay? And is it all work for hire, or so,
I'm gonna not get into the nitty gritty of Hearst contracts while I'm here, but any sort of like freelancer at Hearst signs some kind of contract, and oftentimes like there are like amendments made to them. And
okay, so one thing I'm going to say is, let's say you do an article for, let's say, the New York Times. Well, they say, as we say, they're not going to pay you until you sign a contract, so everybody knows what rights have been kept and given, whatever. Some of these magazines and newspapers will give you a contract, and it will say this will cover this piece and future pieces. No problem. You're dying to get in the New York Times. Isn't that great? Well, so now 2 years later, you have your first novel. You've been nominated for, I don't know, Grant is under 30 or something, whatever. You have all these great credits. That's the contract that will dictate your deal with the Times. You know. So the point is, you try to know as much as you can, and when you're audacious, try to fight for yourself, not just, oh yeah, $50 more, great. It's this larger picture.
Quick question: is there a way to stipulate in that contract that it can be up for review within, like, let's say, a year or 2?
You should put it in, and if they accept it, fine. But I am like a very nice person. I'm never nasty. I mean, I'm nasty like to my son, I think, but I'm nice. I'm nice when he's nasty to me. So I'm so nice, and I was pushing for a big client at the Times because it had to be this way, it wouldn't be another way, blah, blah, blah. She hung up on me. So, you definitely should, and that's very smart, actually. Book contracts now have a term saying if the industry standard changes on this particular term, usually ebook or royalty or something like that, they will review it. So yes, it's a concept you should use. But if you understand how the basic deal points work, and you're starting out, but down the road it might be different, absolutely. The other thing is bet on yourself. Who is going to bet on you until you're like famous? Bet on yourself every step of the way, but I find kindness gets you really far.
It does.
And one thing sort of related to what Gail was talking about, there are often, especially with small publisher and indie publisher book contracts, there are these clauses called the option clause, which basically gives the publisher the right to right of first refusal on your next project, and oftentimes they're construed very broadly. So anything you write could potentially become a property of that publisher, and you want to be careful about that, because if you write your first book and you publish it and it does well, you don't want to go to Joe Publisher from Idaho again. You want to go to Harper or Penguin.
I have a question, but it's taking us in a bit of a different direction. So I feel like we've been talking a lot about contracts between writers and publications, or writers and like publishing houses or editors. But what about contracts between writers and agents? I know that that question is like tumultuous. Yeah, I know that an agency obviously doesn't work for free. So what are some things that writers And I guess I'm asking also because I'm a fiction writer, and I feel like the conversation has tacked more towards the nonfiction, which is great. I mean, I've learned a lot about nonfiction. But, you know, like, what are some, I don't know, percentages? What are some questions that, you know, emerging writers can ask to make sure that they're doing their due diligence before they sign with somebody? Because, like, we, you know, in this program, I don't think in any program, like, people don't really talk about this stuff. You know, I stopped going to classes not having any sense of, you know, what can I expect, like, an agency to take, say, if I get published in the States versus if I get published overseas? You know, how long do I have before I can kind of, like, try to terminate a contract? And how does that work on the agent's end? Questions like that.
Okay, I'm just going to repeat your question quickly for the recording. Yeah. You're asking what are the specifics that a fiction writer, or maybe even nonfiction, needs to know, starting with an agent. What is the contract that you sign with an agent? What do you need to know? What do you need to negotiate, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, so before I even met my agent, I was just doing a lot of studying, like buying books and reading things on the internet, like what are like the general percentages that an agent usually gets off of my work. That stuff I was doing outside of what she was saying, just so I can have some sort of comparative analysis. When she sent the contract over, I actually had a lawyer look at it, because I don't know, I just was really excited. I was just like ready to just sign. So I was like, I had a lawyer look over it. My mother had someone that was able to look over it for me. But I would say definitely make sure that you're reading up on like the publishing industry right now. Make sure that you're just like reading like usually what type of cuts that agents usually get. That's the best thing to do. And also, even aside from the money, like just make sure like you know that person's going to be your champion. Aside from just the writing, like
personal side, not the contract.
Oh yeah, the personal side. Like make sure like it's very nice to, you know, have someone saying I want to represent you, but also make sure that person is going to fight for you when it comes time to settle to deal with contracts, when it comes to publishers, when you get sent out on submission, all those sorts of things.
Okay, make sure. How on earth do you make sure? There's no way to make sure, right? So when she says due diligence, what kind of places you would read, like Poets and Writers and Writers Digest, all that? Yep. So now the agents, from the agent side, my office doesn't have contracts with the authors. I figure if they hate me and I hate them, I don't want to be stuck in a contract one way or the other. But many times an agent will say, yes, I love your book. Number one, do they get your book? You talk about what kind of publishers they would send it to. You talk about what kind of editorial revisions they would want. You talk about, like, you're seeing it as a deep, dark, tragic comedy, and they're seeing it as, I don't know, a Regency romance. I don't know what. Whatever. You want to make sure that that's your book. Great, we have just the agent for. So the point is, make sure they're on. It makes sense what they're saying about you and your book. You should be looking around. Now, when you go to a bookstore, you have a new book, you're looking for an agent. Go sit in Barnes and Noble or any. We all love independence. We all want to tell you to buy your books at Independence, but okay, go to anywhere. Get a stack of books, kind of, sort of like your book. Open it up. How do you know anything about that writer? Look at the acknowledgements page. I want to acknowledge my unbelievable, fabulous, wonderful agent, so and so. So you write it down. And which editors do they say or so? So you start to educate yourself. So you start to have some sense of this world that you're about to enter. You're not just going to some agent and trusting whatever they do. Yeah. There's no way you'll ever know if the agent will call you back that day or that week. There's no way you'll know if the agent will do the work or give it to their assistant or forget about you. So you want to look at their. So everybody has a website. Google them, see whether they've been written up in Poets and Writers. Do that kind of research. You can get a feeling for them. You have a conversation with them. The Authors Guild did an article which I so hated, so look at it, but I wouldn't follow it, about what questions to ask the agent. I was so insulted by this article. Talk to them. What do you think about my book? What struck you? What worked? What didn't work? What kind of houses would you send it to? If the agent is saying Tor Books, that does science fiction and fantasy, and you're thinking so-and-so big important person at Knopf and Farrar Straus, I don't think you're on the same wavelength. Either you're out of your mind, or it's not the agent for you. Do you know what I mean? So first you do the personal thing. Then you're going to get I don't do a contract, but other people do. Now, just to say this, in every book contract, it will bind the author and the publisher to that agent. So the publisher has to pay the agent. If I sell your book, the publisher has to pay me for that book. And then the agent takes in the money, keeps their commission, and sends the money to the author, right? There are agents, and I'm the president of the Agents Association. We have complaints periodically if somebody doesn't pay their authors. Whoa, big problem. You don't want anybody like that, do you? No. So most of the time, a person who's reputable, you've heard of, you Google them, you see their client list is reputable, they're not going to be holding your money back. ICM agents are not sitting on your money, you know. So the agency contract would say, for so-and-so time, for the purposes of this book and the next book, or just this book, whatever it'll say, for so-and-so period, we are your agents and we will do these things for you, blah, 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 and you will do these things. It'll say who pays what. You will have to reimburse us. In the olden days, it was for copies of books and for Xeroxes, like you had to charge for Xeroxing. Isn't it nice? We press send, cost nobody anything. So, you know, and it will, now, my advice about reading the contract, if you don't know what it is, call the Authors Guild, call a lawyer. Number one, always know how you can get out. I mean, I don't know if everybody would say that. If you have an agency contract, you're signing it, and you find you're unhappy, oh my God, I made the wrong match. You have to understand what happens. Getting out. If I sell your book and I have a contract with you, there's a question that you don't know anything about today because you're willing to sign anything. The question is, I sell your book to Random House or Simon & Schuster, wherever it is. And let's say 10 years down the road, 5 years down the road, bless you, there's a film deal. Once you have a film deal, film is an international right, so the film is released everywhere. Suddenly your book is of interest in all these countries. And you broke up with the original agent. Great, you've moved on, you have a film deal, isn't that great? Who owns the unsold rights to your first book? It sounds like, oh, I don't have to worry about that today, but guess what? Bet on yourself, you do. So if you leave that first agent, ideally you're taking with you all rights that that agent didn't sell. Mm-hmm. And some of the agency agreements say, we are the agents, well, whatever time period, or we are the agents of this book, period. Well, if I'm your agent now and I make you a film deal, and we've had this situation, your old agent won't, so they have to get commissioned on your foreign rights. Maybe you want me to sell your foreign rights. Great, but then I have to double commission you, which just makes me twitch, it gives me hives. I don't want to double commission you, I'm working for you, I want you to have enough money to live. Am I making sense what that means, the unsold rights? So there's many different things. If the agent is supposed to send you money at a certain time, I don't know if it's in the contract, put it in the contract. The agent's organization is called the AAR, Association of Authors Representatives, and we have a canon of ethics. So to start to understand what's kind of considered reputable behavior, just read the canon of ethics. Do you see what I'm saying? Yeah. But there's no easy answer, and can you negotiate with those agents? Well, if you don't try, you are stark raving mad. Because if what it says is something you don't understand, what does it mean? Don't sign what you don't know what it means. You don't know what the ramifications are. Say, I really feel uncomfortable about this, can we change it? They may say no, okay, but try. And people have over the years asked me for a reference. Give me a reference of a client, and I look at them like, oh yeah, right. I'm going to give you a home phone number of some client. Do the research. Everybody's online. It's not hard. But don't just think, oh great, an agent loves my stuff. Great, I'm going there. That may be the dumbest thing you ever do. You got to do your own, due diligence and discuss all the pieces of the agent-author agreement that you feel, in your case, may not serve you well.
We want to shift the conversation slightly to an equally important topic, which is something that I think is on many people's minds, which is this idea of diversity. So whether that's in terms of race, gender, sexuality, nationality, or anything. Currently the publishing and media industry is changing a lot to become more inclusive of certain stories. Do you feel that, for example, Leah and Gail, in your work, that you're whether this plays into an active consideration or that it's in the back of your minds? And Umair and Morgan, do you think that for writers that they can use it to their benefit or not?
Well, I can attest to Leah. Like Elle is great when it comes to diversity. Like one of Leah's coworker, she commissioned a piece for me to write about lemonade, and it's it was incredible. It was great. I loved it. And I think now's the time to use it to your advantage. And once again, like I say, try to be online, because I feel like even though online it could be an echo chamber, it does sort of destabilize those barriers with which people from underrepresented backgrounds can sort of connect to agents and editors irrespective of their location. It's something that I think also comes with a lot of responsibility too. A lot of times, like, I'll see writers and writers, especially women of color writers, I'll say to them, like, make sure you have this pitch, but also make sure, like, you're not creating, like, long threads online where you can get paid for those same thoughts. Do not let these staff writers go on your website, go on your Twitter page and your Facebook and see your ideas and make a post off it, and they're getting paid for it. Like, if you think that you can expand that far, that long on a given subject, you need to be writing a pitch. And that's what I tell people all the time. I see so many brilliant people that just write these 20 to 40 tweet threads, and it's like somebody's gonna embed that tweet. And that's not to say there's something wrong with embedding tweets, but it's like the same people are the ones that are talking about that no one's paying them for the work, and it's like, but your work is right there on a public space. Like, monetize that. You know what I mean? So that's what I'm saying. It's like, be mindful of the ideas that you put out on the internet, because staff writers are looking, editors are looking, and if you think you can expand on it, like, don't give it away. And I'm a victim of that. Like, the other day, like, I said something, I was like, does everyone know the film Good Burger? So Good Burger's 20th anniversary is this year. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, I tweeted it, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, Good Burger taught us about gentrification. And I was like, no. Somebody like tweeted me and was like, you just gave someone a picture. I was like, oh my God. Because I was like, that would have been amazing. And I do it sometimes, but like, just be mindful of what you put out on the internet, because people are watching. It takes one retweet to someone else. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a story. I'm going to pitch it to my editor, and then I'm going to get paid for it. Be very mindful of your ideas, because more times than not that they're extremely valuable. Get paid for that. So that's what I would say. Just, do that. Yeah. I'm just really bad about that idea. Sorry.
No, I mean, that's a very good point, because I think we're in a strange kind of parallel. We're in this, not parallel dimension. We're in this world, but the publishing ecosystem is kind of split in a way where print publishing often has like a very hierarchical sort of structure, but then there is this open kind of ecosystem where everyone's writing and everyone's talking, and raises some very interesting questions about who has ownership. So, but very good point. These are words, and they like a shoe jingle could make you millions of dollars. So, same way, just be mindful of what you're saying in that, and if you have a good idea, keep it and develop it into something that you can make money from, and take us out all for drinks.
Yeah. Though I will say, a lot of times as an editor, a lot of times what I do is, if I'm not the person editing the actual piece, I'm always looking for new talent and new voices, and making Elle become a more inclusive place, particularly when women's magazines have a legacy of being very white and thin and straight. It has been one of my missions to sort of broaden what that space looks like, so more readers can see themselves reflected on the site. And so I would hope too that there are other editors like me who see a tweet thread and DM that person and say, like, okay, write this thing, because I do it all the time. And like, one of my like most popular columnists right now, this guy Eric Thomas, like, oh God, I love it. He's hilarious. He's like very beloved, and he had a post on Facebook that was like just a photo post with a caption that I thought was hilarious. And I just messaged him. I was like, do you want to try doing this? Like, all the time? See how it goes? And he did, and it works, So I think there's like something to like knowing, like, don't give it all away. Don't do the 40 sort of like one of one, like, don't like go all the way. But I think like there's something to, like, I'm always looking at, at voices, and when I see a good idea, like, I'm going to reach out to that person to say, like, you want to flesh this out.
Yeah, and then on that similar vein, like also protect your mind a lot, especially if you're the type who wants to do a lot of hot takes. You don't have to be that writer, especially black writers, who always has to write about a police shooting going on. That will wear you down. Trust me, it did for me. And
like I was gonna say, if you wanted to write about lemonade, right? Like,
yeah, like if you want to write about lemonade, if you want to write about Solange, if you want to write about, I don't know, like the intersection between like trans rights and punk rock, like it's okay to do that. Don't feel like you're in a box all the time. And it's okay to like say, you know what, I'm gonna get burnt out. This is too much emotional labor for me. I'm gonna sit and I'm gonna maybe develop this into a feature where I won't like burn myself out in that way, and I can let it sit. Don't feel like you have to be, I hate to say this, but like an attack dog. Like if an editor says like, hey, can you turn this around? Like another shooting happened in Ferguson, can you turn this around? You say, you know, I can't. Don't feel like you derailed your career in any way, because you have to look out for yourself. You can't produce your best work if you just keep fizzling out over tragedies that keep happening all the time.
Right. Yeah, that's a very, very good point, because I mean, I guess from personal experience too, I used to be in the habit of every time some sort of terrorist attack happened, I would write like an explanatory, post about, what the misconceptions about Islam, and it took me a few years to realize how exhausting and sort of destructive it was for my own identity, which was very different. And I think Morgan, what you're trying to say is that just because there is this demand or this need for other voices doesn't mean that those other voices have to say, talk about these stereotypical things, like it's just like make your identity, whatever you identify as, make it, present it as richly as it exists in the world, so.
Right, your work does not always have to be about pain and suffering. Like pain and suffering is it's important to talk about, but also talk about the glorious moments, i.e. lemonade.
Okay, we know that Morgan has to get out of here because she has class. We want to open up the floor to questions. So does anyone have any questions for our panelists? Yes.
Hi. Thank you guys all so much for showing up and doing this. It's very helpful. I ran into a situation where I had kind of a dream agent agree to look at my work, but on the grounds that I would give it to her exclusively, just to look. It seems a little shady to me. But
No, it's not.
It's not shady.
Is this normal?
Okay, I just want to go ahead and repeat the question for our audio recording. So you're saying that you had a dream agent who came to you and, oh, you went to her. And okay, she agreed to read your work. However, she wanted to have exclusive rights to reading your work.
No, she wanted to be the only agent reading it until she decided.
She wanted to be the only agent. Okay. You want to go ahead?
So the answer to that is come to my house. Even beloved clients, I could spend all day Saturday reading that manuscript. So if I'm going to be, I never ask for exclusive, so that's me. Okay, I don't know why, I don't expect it, but it's a way of thinking. If I'm spending my whole Saturday reading your book, I know if your book is 200 pages or your book is 500 pages, if your book is 500 pages, it's all day Saturday. Now other people are in the park and the museum and they're going to the show and they're going shopping and they're having fun, and I am home reading your manuscript. So maybe I'm saying, look, I'm so important because I'm a dream agent. I want to know that if I like your manuscript, you'll talk to me before you talk to somebody. Number one, they may have an exclusive. That doesn't mean if they like your book and they want to represent you, you have to say yes. You still have to go through all the questions that matter to you about, attaching to an agent. It's not unusual. So if they want an exclusive and you like that person that much, you could say, what is the time frame here? You're not giving them an exclusive for 5 months. You might give them 2 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever. If somebody calls me and says, I'm going to send you my manuscript, okay, fine, thank you. I'm thinking, holy shit, when on earth? Well, I suppose I might just stay up all night between Saturday and Sunday and I could read all this stuff. Because that's how much stuff we have to read. So
but this is a verbal agreement, right?
It's not a legally binding.
Oh, this is generally a verbal agreement. Anybody makes you sign the thing, that would be quite unusual.
Yeah.
It's not that unusual. That's not shady. How they play their thing with you might be uncomfortable for you, but that particular thing isn't necessarily.
Yeah, that wouldn't be that's not legally binding. I mean, of course, like if even if you this might be unethical on your part if you give them your manuscript and say, yes, I'm only showing this to you, and then you show it to dream agent number 2, and both want them, but then it's kind of like, okay, like if you really want it, then you'll sell it. So there's nothing unethical about it. Well, I mean, it's bad form, I think.
I don't think it's bad.
You don't
form.
think it's bad form? Okay.
I don't do it, so obviously I personally think it's bad form. But I am giving you my whole Saturday. I got piles of client manuscripts, and I'm giving it to you because it's exclusive.
No, I meant for the author to sort of tell the agent, yeah, you're the only person looking at it.
It's bad form to lie about it.
Yeah, bad form to lie in general.
Okay, do we have any other questions? Anyone? Don't be shy.
Oh, don't be shy.
There we go. Andrew, what question do you have?
I just wanted to hear a thought or two from anyone on kill fees.
Kill fees.
It's in our contract. It's like a percentage of the fee.
What's the percentage?
It's a quarter.
Can I just say something about, somebody asked about agents, what you should expect. Any agent can charge you any percentage that they want. It's an antitrust issue, like literally it's an antitrust issue. So, and you ask any agent. So I can't say to you the usual commission is X. And I can't really say to you, if you find someone who charges other than so-and-so, that would be weird. So I can tell you what my office charges. And I have to say that anybody can charge anything, but when you go and ask 20, significant agents, I'd be quite surprised if you found a lot of difference. But we all charge whatever we want. So what my office charges, so you have a little bit of a grounding, we charge 15% for domestic rights. That means we're selling your book in the US and Canada, and we would charge you. So if you get a $10,000 contract, my office gets paid $1,500. The money comes to us. As it comes in, we take that percent. If I work on your book through 10 drafts of your 500-page book on my Saturdays, and I do not ever sell it, even though I try so hard, I go to 40 places. Raise your hand if you know how much I get paid.
0.
I get paid 0. So, okay, so that's one thing. For foreign rights, so we many of us have an agent in France, and an agent in England, and an agent in Germany, whatever. It's usually my office charges, not usually, my office, 10% for the US agent, 10% for the foreign agent. If there's tax in that country that cannot be given back to you, like Japan or something has a 5% tax, so that, if it's a $10,000 deal, the tax comes off, but we take this percent of the $10,000 and the other agent take. Film agents usually will go with what you, like CA, the big corporations, you say, is this, what percent client is this, 15% fine. They would split that with us. So if you work through your book agent with CA, let's say, usually they're splitting 15% if that's what your agent charges. I'm hearing from the film agents often that they're now charging 20%. So you're thinking, oh my God, that's so much money. I worked my whole life for this one little novel. I got $10,000. They're taking so much money. All my Saturdays, revision after revision, all my submissions, I take the calls and they say, well, where else can we submit it? We all want to sell your book. Your agent is your team player, not your adversary. But so that's how my office works. And if you found something wildly, what you thought was extreme, go to the Authors Guild and talk to them about whether they think that's reasonable.
That's very. This is the standard. It's very reasonable. The range that we've seen is between. Yeah, it's around 12 to 15, and what Gail said,
Yeah.
that's very rarely. Okay, so 12. Most of the contracts that I've seen are 15%, and so that seems to be to me the standard. But again, agency agreements are sort of they can be also very informal. Gail mentioned this earlier. Oftentimes they're oral agreements, and there's no writing. But
the percentage,
yeah.
If you sign up with an agent, you absolutely have to know what they're charging you, what they're charging for. If they Xerox, if they call France for you, their agents. We used to charge. I never did, but other people. If they mail a bunch of books to another country, they would charge you. We never did that, but people do. You have to know what you're being charged.
Yeah.
You do not want to find out at the end of the day.
Right, and in that respect, if you have a written agreement, what we recommend is that make sure to put in something that says if the agent spends more than $50, you know, on my account, then they have to get my permission or at least inform me. Because permission is
permission.
because you don't want them to sort of like, you know, say we FedEx your book to, you know, Vladivostok and send you like a $500 bill or whatever it costs.
And Morgan, as a freelancer, I'm also curious about what your policy is with kill fees. Do you, if a publication doesn't offer a kill fee, do you then just go ahead, or do you ask for it? How much do you ask for? How does that work?
Oh, they usually, the editors that I've worked with, they've usually offered the kill fee and they told me what it was. Usually it would be like a third or maybe like a fourth of like what I was gonna be paid. That's usually, they usually bring it up. I've never had a thing where I was like, hey, can I get paid for this? I've been really fortunate in that regard.
Okay, the other thing about a kill fee, you want to make sure you can take that piece and sell it somewhere.
Oh yeah.
And a bit of a prelude for people who don't know what a kill fee is. Probably Morgan, you can speak to this. What is a kill fee and why is it important?
Oh, it's so violent. I hate the word. Like I really hate. I wish that journalism would come up with like a new word. But basically, what it is like, I pitched something to Leah, and I'm like, I want to write about Orange is the New Black and the prison industrial complex. Great, all right, go ahead. And then it's like, okay, so it's 1,000 words, and we're going back and forth, and then it's like, it is not coming together. For some reason, the threads are just not coming together. So you know what? Like, we're just gonna kill it. So what that means, even if I signed a contract, even if I was gonna pay X amount of money, because it wasn't coming together, it's like, it's not gonna get published. I will get a kill fee for that, and generally speaking, like I can take it someplace else. But a kill fee basically means that even if you write it, even if you went through X amount of drafts, it can get killed if it's not coming together.
Which means they don't buy it, they don't publish it, but because you did your work that you were contracted to do, they're paying. They call it killing a piece. They're not killing you.
But
you come back,
it hurts.
Half the time, unless you were a complete jerk, they really feel bad. They don't want to be killing it. So
sometimes as a writer, you might want to initiate a kill fee as well if you don't like the way a piece is being edited. So that's also within your agency to say, like, you know what, like, I just want to take the kill fee.
Yeah,
that's good to know.
Then you
We
can
have
take
one
it somewhere else.
question here with the green chips.
Oh, yeah. My question was about, I know obviously once a pitch gets accepted, there's editing and all that, but upon pitching it, has there ever been a situation, I guess Morgan, this is a question for you, but where the editor might come back and sort of ask you to alter what the pitch is to be accepted? How do you negotiate that?
Okay, so your question is, upon pitching, the editor may come back to you and ask you to restructure the pitch, and how often that happens, and what are the circumstances in those type of situations for Morgan?
Generally speaking, like it would usually be an ongoing conversation. Like it wouldn't be a situation where it's like, oh, I'm thinking about this, and are you okay with that? And I'm like, okay, yeah. And then that person will be like, okay, well then send me your fine pitch. Usually it's like I'll be going back and forth with the editor, and the editor will be like, well, can you find some other additional references? How about you tie this in? Are you okay with doing that? And I'm like, okay. And then I'm like, okay, go ahead. Sometimes when at Catapult, if I don't know the writer's work at all, I will do that where someone's like the pitch seems interesting, but it's still a little bit too general. There's not like an anecdote or anything that's attached to story to bring out the story. I will say like, can you come back with a pitch? But for me, it hasn't happened as much.
Okay, go ahead.
I'd say it's very frequent.
It is,
You'll
yeah.
go back and forth with an editor to shape a pitch and then sort of go from there.
I've got a question for you, Gail. You mentioned earlier revisions to a manuscript. So you get a manuscript, you really like it, but you have some revisions that you want the author to make before you pitch it to publishers. On what basis would you be suggesting those revisions? Like, is it the marketplace? Is it a character?
Okay, so the question is, on what basis would revisions need to be made in order for the novel or the manuscript to be pitched to publishers?
So I go to my office every day and I come home every night, and sometimes offers come in, but more often we get rejection letters. So over time, you know, the story didn't start till page 100, I didn't care about the characters, so-and-so was downbeat, so it's not the marketplace. Oh, the marketplace doesn't like books about Vietnam or whatever. It's not that for me, because I don't really care about the marketplace. If I love it, then I love it. And the marketplace may hate that kind of thing. but my editorial work hopefully will make it that better and better and better. So your book is too long. The book is 900 pages. Guess what? I'm not sending it out. I had a guy hand it in. We published his first 2 books. I mean, we sold them to publish. 1,150 pages. And I'm thinking, God, what an ego, 1,150 pages. So I read it, and actually what I realized, if a person writes a couple of pages and they repeat themselves, like the sentence kind of repeats, that she's wearing a red dress. Her red dress was very hot in the sun. Okay, maybe there's a progression there, but sometimes it's just like repeat, repeat, repeat. So easy. This wasn't that easy. He repeated this, making sure that you got the point. He wrote his little description. The next paragraph described the same scene, but it wasn't that clear that it was the same. So I looked at it thinking, I can't even read 1,100 pages. So I read it and I edited a lot to say, they're not reading it. You get an instant reject. So the basis is, I don't want to get an instant reject, and I can tell you in my sleep the 40 things that we get rejected for the most. So that's why I say talk to the agent about what editorial ideas they may want you to do. People say, oh, I'll edit it if I get an editor. Oh, yeah, right. You're going to edit when you get an editor. The editors are reading 50 pages, 100 pages. When they're ready to give it up, I can live without this book. Oh, but the best stuff happens on page 120. Do you understand? So the basis is, let us get this book in shape. So when you open that, it used to be a box. Each agency had a colored box, so you get a red box, a red book, manuscript in a red box, and you say, oh my God, I love that agent. I mean, it was really very funny. You open it up, you start reading 20 pages, you gotta be hooked. So that's the basis. I guess that's the easiest way to say it. And it's not that anybody, this is the other thing. If you're writing for a magazine and they want to edit you and they're about to go to press and they're editing you, fine, talk to them, interact with them, get it to be so that you're both happy. On a book manuscript, my feeling personally, that is your book. If the agent says, well, make the dog a cat, and make the girl a boy, and I think they should be bisexual, that may not be your book. Forget it. And if the editor says that editor's got to be a genius that you really trust for you to make your book what it's not. But a magazine is different because they have a larger canvas of things that they're publishing and they know who their readers are, and it's more, you know what I mean? You can't be so far outside what they know they can publish well.
One thing I just wanted to say that I was thinking about, since most of you are working on books in some way, shape, or form, that like 2 things. You have a book and you've sold it and you're ready to promote it. That's the way that I found a lot of really fantastic writers, because as you all know, part of the way you promote a book now is you write essays that live in as many different publications as you can get it out there. So and you time them as close as you can to pub date so that you can be ready. And one of my favorite writers, like Caitlin Greenwich, and I didn't really, she was just like, oh, I have a book coming out. I have these essays that I've just been sitting on. Do you want to take a look? And they were fantastic. It was just like, here. And I think it also, I think Morgan said this as well, you have a book, you figure out an essay from that book, you get that out there, and then someone sees it and says oh, I think this should be a book, and you're like, it is, so that's a really nice way that I've come in contact with a lot of sort of the writers that I love working with on the site, so I thought it'd be worth mentioning.
I have a question for Gail about the book submission process. I know that an agent can only submit a book to one editor per imprint. And I'm just wondering why that is, because there's so many editors with so many various tastes. And I know that a rejection from one editor per imprint means an overall rejection for that. So I'm just curious why.
Do you guys want to repeat your question? Do you understand it?
Can you speak up a little bit, because we can't hear you that very
well?
well.
Sorry.
Oh, I can repeat it.
Okay.
It's a little specific, so I don't want to spend too much time being too specific, but agents make a list of where they're going to send a book. You send it to one editor at Viking, and one editor at Riverhead, and one editor at Random House, let's say, and one editor at Simon. And I think your question is, why is it that you can't send it to 2 editors at Riverhead? Right. Okay, think about it. What am I doing on Saturdays and Sundays every day of my life?
Everyone should ask that question all the time.
You really, not what I'm doing. So if you give it to this editor and that editor, so if it's, the publishers would, number one, the agent wouldn't do it because it's so against the grain, because it's using up everybody's time. So if one guy does thrillers and one guy does romances, you're going to send it to the guy who does thrillers. Or you're going to have had lunch and this guy has a sense of humor that matches a book, but you were already going to send it to this other guy. You don't send it to both. It doesn't happen. So recently I had a manuscript that was revised for like the 900 millionth time, and I had an editor had moved from this house to that house. So now there were two editors in one house that liked this book, even though it needed some work. So I actually, what I did, because it's disrespectful, it's not done. Why would you have two people reading the same thing? Everybody would basically reject it because you did that, because you cannot use two people's time. So, okay, but the question is, let's move the question along. If I get a rejection because I sent it to an editor who wasn't exactly the right editor, and they're so hot to trot, they read it, they want to impress me, they don't like it, they reject it. That's a rejection from that house. If I have any brains and heart and soul, it's not. Because I might think, oh God, I'm such a moron. I just had lunch with this other person in that house. That person knows all about ballet, and this novel's about ballet. So I'm going to say to that person, you know, I had this weird experience. I sent it to, you know, John Smith, who he's like a football star from high school and college. This guy doesn't care about ballet. Why did I send it to him? Would you take a look at this book on ballet? Do you see? So I'm breaking the rules, but absolutely telling them. But we all want to blanket the world with our manuscript, but it's just not the way the world works. And when I find sometimes that 3 people in my office have a manuscript, if that's the way it worked out, I am furious. We worked so hard. So it's a matter of choosing a person and conserving everybody's time. But you can have a do-over if you really did send to the wrong guy.
So we're very sorry, but we have kind of a hard end for this event. Yeah. So because we're like a hard stop. If you have any questions, we'll be lingering around. Morgan has to go quite quickly, but I'm sure you can reach her in any other way. Like we said, there is the internet. Thank you so much for coming. Sasha and I are very grateful.
Some more information about the guild if you guys are interested in joining and looking at what we do. So.
Are you going to post the recording?
Yes, we are. The recording will be online. Get some more wine before you leave.